Hello and welcome to a sewing vlog. Today I am making a bunch of skirts because I don't have very many bottoms in my wardrobe. So I really thought that it would be nice to have some mini skirts. I think it'll look really cute. I know we're going into the winter season now, but I'm very excited because I feel like this will look really nice. I want to show you the fabric that I bought. So we're going to make like 5 or 6 skirts in the coming week because I cannot sew for many hours in a day. I start making mistakes. So if you're kind of like me, where you feel like you're not very productive with your sewing, don't worry. It's normal. I'm a slow sewer. So these are all the fabrics that we have. This is leftover from a blazer. I thought this would look nice as a pleated skirt. This is a wool poly blend. I really hate polyester, but this was just so beautiful. And I feel like if I beef it up with a nice lining, it'll look really nice. It is on the lightweight side, so even though it's wool, it's kind of transparent, but I think it'll be a really nice skirt. So like I said in my one video about fall planning my wardrobe, which I'll link up here, I want to do some more dopamine dressing. So I need bright colors, which is why this green is in my stash. I also bought this red cotton twill, also on the lightweight side, but then we have the heavier weight fabrics. So I bought all of these from Mood Fabrics. This one is just gorgeous. It has burgundy, yellows, turquoise, light blue. It's gonna be so pretty. I do need to figure out what I'm gonna wear on top with this and maybe the bottoms. I feel like a pair of brown tights would look really nice with this. And then we have this sparkly tweed-like fabric, and it's got houndstooth on it. Again, polyester, but it's really hard to find, if not impossible, to find tweed that doesn't have some poly in it. I'm not gonna launder this one. I'm probably gonna use vodka and just spray it because it's 100% polyester. It'll kill the bacteria, or so I've heard. I don't know if that's true, but anyway, let's get started. I have all these vintage patterns that I'm going to use today. Well, not all of them are vintage, but this one in particular is. So I planned this all out on my iPad. And so the first one's going to be this crossover type skirt, like with a button closure, and it's going to be made out of the red twill. Then I've been thinking about what other skirts that I wanted in my wardrobe. And also I have a bunch of just ideas for what I'm going to be doing in the coming months. But I'm thinking this skirt and then hem it real short. But I think this one will be really cute with the houndstooth, both of the houndstooth tweeds. And then I'm planning on making a pair of pants out of that plaid fabric that I showed you, but I have enough to not only make the pants, but also to make this skirt with the little pleats and the side detail. I think that's gonna look really nice. This is a simplicity pattern. And then I think I might make this skirt with the crossover buckle, much shorter than what it is right now, out of that green, that jolly green giant fabric. And then of course we have more plaid. So those are the plans for today. I'm gonna try to cut out as much as possible. So first let's iron our fabric. A couple thoughts. I know I said I was gonna get into pattern drafting and I really wanted to pattern draft these skirts, but honestly, I just don't have the time to be producing videos, learning how to pattern draft and everything. So I am gonna take you through some of the steps that I'm doing with these patterns and like any modifications that I make and things like that. But I'm just not clever enough to learn pattern drafting that quickly, like that. So I'm going to use these patterns, especially for things like this pattern with the pleats in it. I don't really know how to draft that. I don't even know how to sew that. So I want the basis to learn how to draft something like this. I need reference for how I would even go about sewing it. It's not even the process of drafting this. I feel like this isn't a super hard one to draft, but it would be literally the process of sewing it all together and like figuring that out in my brain. But yeah, and a couple more thoughts. I laundered all my fabric before we're gonna start sewing because it's really important to do this. You don't want it to shrink when you've finished a product and then throw it in the wash and it shrinks. Also, I noted any issues with the fabric. So what I did was I went through all the fabric after I laundered it and made sure that it didn't have any marks or any irregularities. So we're gonna iron our fabric first. Now, why do you do this? Like, why is this important? Some people just go willy-nilly and just start cutting out their fabric before ironing it. Well, personally, and I mean, you do you, I don't care. It's your project, you're sewing, you get into it however you'd like. But for me, taking the extra preparation to do this is going to make your life so much more easy, particularly since you're getting all the wrinkles out. So sometimes it can grow in places. Like if you put a pattern down that hasn't been pressed, so you also want to press your patterns, but if you put a pattern down and then have all wrinkly fabric and a wrinkly pattern, it's going to skew the size of whatever you're making. So for me, I don't want it to be too large on my waist and everything. And I know this pattern runs a little big on me, so I will have to make modifications. But also, if I did that, it might be too small, it might be too large. I just don't know. Probably too small, because making those creases is gonna really like shrink it up a little. So we're also gonna iron our patterns, and I need to cut this one out too. I don't cut the pattern out, like I don't lay it out and then cut it as I'm going. I usually cut out my pattern first and then iron it without steam. You don't want the steam option on because it'll shrink the pattern. Also, I'm gonna have to hem these quite a bit because I only bought a yard of each of the fabrics. So it's really important to not make any mistakes with this, especially for these houndstooth ones or any pattern that I have in this collection. I wanna make sure that I'm able to match everything. So we are gonna have to be super careful and try to pattern match these as best as we can. All right, first fabric, wrinkle free. Time to cut out before it gets wrinkled again. This first pattern is gonna be for the red one, and I'm going to do this skirt right here, but I'm gonna shorten it to like here-ish. I had to be so careful with ironing this pattern. I don't know, let's see, when the pattern was made, but it's been a while. This is a vintage pattern. I got it from this really nice lady at City Sewing Room. I think she's passed away. It's very sad. But before she passed, she gave me all of her vintage patterns that I wanted. So I saw this one and immediately caught my eye. I've had it for years now and I have not had an opportunity to make it. I think it's gonna be kind of challenging, not because it's challenging per se, but because I've lost my confidence with sewing. But anyway, we are going to start cutting out now. I had to tape a bunch of pieces together because it was all falling apart, and I had to be very delicate with the iron. No steam. Frankly, I didn't even get the wrinkles out for the most part because I was ironing on a lower temperature. This pattern is so beautiful. I just think it's so interesting how people back in the day would sew their own clothing and would make really quality luxury pieces. And it's so nice to think about these vintage patterns and what life they lived before this. I am gonna have to shorten this quite a bit because I don't have enough fabric for this. I'm not sure, let's see. D calls for 1 5/8 yard. I have 1 yard. So I thought maybe if I shorten it enough, it'll work. Maybe, I don't know. And then this calls for underlining. All these vintage patterns usually call for underlining, which I think is gonna help beef this up quite a bit. So I need to shorten this by 9 1/4 inches. Unfortunately, I still don't know if I'm gonna have enough fabric for this skirt, but I think what my plan is that this is 36 inches. So, and this is 27 inches. So only one right now can fit on this, but if I shorten it, I could do this and then flip it and maybe that'll work. I'm not sure though. I think I did the calculations right, but I'm not sure. And anyway, if I shorten it, I might be able to get 2 in instead of just 1, because if we take this and we measure from here, that's 18. 18 times 2 is 36, right? So we need to shorten it just a little more, but I still feel like this is gonna be on the long side, so I'm not super concerned about it. There'll be enough of the fabric to cover my bum. And if we have to cut this a little shorter, so be it. So now it's 17 1/4 inches. I hate cutting into this pattern, but it needs to be done. I'll keep the pattern piece for reference and then I'll be able to use this later. I also need to try on this size. Oh yeah, that's gonna be the perfect length. You can't see it, but I can. It's not too short, it's not too long. It's just right, as Goldilocks would say. It just barely fits, but it fits. And if it fits, it ships. So we'll shorten this one by 9 1/2 inches too. 9¼ inches. Yay, we're gonna start working on this fabric and this fabric. So this is gonna be for the same pattern. So for this one, we're also gonna have to shorten it significantly. And I actually made this skirt before, but for this one, we're gonna need to pattern match everything. So this calls for 1 yard of fabric. So I figure if we shorten it, we'll be able to pattern match everything. And what I'm gonna do is make sure that these two notch here and the notch here kind of match up. And I think I might just move it towards the end. That way I can make sure that I'm doing this appropriately. We're gonna cut this piece out first, then we're gonna put that one on the fold, but I've already marked where it needs to match up. So I'm making sure to pin this pretty securely. That way the pattern doesn't shift around and we'll have a perfect pattern match. Unfortunately, I am missing a pattern piece for this one. So I cut out this strip, which is approximately 4.5 inches by 38 inches. So this should fit around my waist. And I gave myself a little leeway room so that when I attach this, I'll just be able to make it work. Now we just need to cut out this brown tweed. I'm very excited to cut into this one. It's so pretty. And then before I do anything else, or like after I finish cutting out all the skirts, I am gonna serge everything because this fabric is so ravelly. I don't want it to unravel as I'm getting ready to sew it all together. So even before I do my markings and everything, I'm going to serge the edges of this. But the bottom's already fraying quite a bit. So just want to be very conscious of that. And then I have a ton of scrap fabric left. I have this whole piece right here. I'm gonna save this in case I make any mistakes because I believe there's enough to maybe make a bag. And now we're gonna just serge every seam. I think I'm gonna have to remark all the notches that I cut out, but that's okay because this will ultimately save me time and it'll help prevent fraying. And luckily we don't have to serge this frayed edge because it's the selvage and it's already stable. I made a little bit of a mistake. So I thought that I was gonna do a separate lining, but then I was like, ooh, what if I did an underlining? So this is an underlining. Basically, this is the fashion fabric, this is the lining piece, and then you base this all together, and then it becomes one piece that you work with. Now, why am I doing this? So my thought process being that I don't want scratchy wool to be next to my skin or scratchy tweed to be next to my skin. But also, I feel like it's just gonna make it look nicer. I was gonna do a lining, but then I was like, this pattern doesn't call for it. It actually calls for an underlining because it's a vintage pattern and that's just what they did back in the day. But why would I baste all this? So that's an interesting question, but basically you get more control when you baste around the edges. That is all hand sewn. So I've already done these skirt pieces and then I'll mark my patterns, but because I did that, I need to serge the edges again. I have this super long needle, and that's a basting needle, and then I have this basting thread that I bought from Susan Calgi. So she's a really cool couture instructor. She teaches classes and she also has a store, and I get all my basting thread from her. Oh, by the way, this is an old bed sheet that I had stains on it and things like that. I thought, who cares? No one's gonna see it on the inside, and I cut around the stains for the most part. But also, it's just gonna make this warmer, a little more luxurious. Now I just need to mark everything. So this is my super big wax tracing paper. And since I have that underlining underneath, I don't care that it's wax and it won't come out because it's not gonna show on the other side. I'm gonna start my project with a new needle. So I have this huge box of Schmetz needles, which I love. So we always start off a project with a new needle, right? Right? Maybe. Anyway, and we're gonna use white thread even though the fabrics are different because we have this underlining fabric in white. So once I do the hem and everything, I'll change to whatever color I think is appropriate. I do wanna give you a tip. So when you have a pattern that has, well, pretty much any pattern where you're putting in a zipper, you're going to want to interface the edge where the zipper goes. This pattern calls for a zipper on the side seam, and that is actually on the bias, and you can kind of tell because of the way the fabric goes. We're going to want to add a strip of fusible interfacing here on the inside so that when you put the skirt zipper in, it'll just align perfectly and won't do anything weird. So I've had a zipper on a bias cut dress before, and the zipper just wouldn't zip anymore, and so it was kind of a waste of fabric, time, and money. And I have this really cool tool. It's a ham, a pressing ham, and you want this whenever you do darts. But my cool tool is the pressing ham stand that I have. And so this just allows me to do this, or this, or this. So basically it stands up in whatever position I need. Like, this is just the best tool ever. First, we'll lock the stitches in by doing a gentle press. A little steam there. Now, we're gonna put this over our ham, and I'm just getting up to the point edge of, so this lies flat, and then we'll just press it. And you can use your hand, although it hurts because it's very hot, or you can use this tailor's clapper, and that'll just flatten this, and it'll make this really nice looking press seam. So you can see just how lovely that press is. And now we can just assemble everything together. I'm gonna try to pin as much together as possible. I'm also gonna take out our basting stitches. We'll assemble the back pieces together. And you know, I think I'm gonna change my presser foot to a walking foot. That way, when I match all these, they're gonna look appropriate. I'm not sure. Basically what a walking foot does is it allows the fabric to feed evenly from both sides, and I need that so that my plaid all matches up, or the houndstooth all matches up, although I'm not so sure I cut this out right. Anyway, we'll do the backs first, then we'll stitch up the side seams, do a zipper, and then put the waistband on. Okay, so you know how I underlined that skirt and I was like, oh, I won't need a lining. This is gonna be fine. Well, turns out my mother suggested that I put in a lining because if I go and sit down, it's gonna show the white part underneath. And I was like, okay, but I really don't wanna go back to the fabric store. So I went back to the fabric store, bought more supplies for the project anyway, so I also bought some thread and some buttons. I was only able to find cotton to line my skirts with. The problem is that I cannot get rayon or silk or anything like that in the colors that I needed it to be. So this is what we're working with, and we're just gonna make it work, as Tim Gunn would say. So I think what we're gonna do is we're gonna get out the cutting table. We're gonna lay the pattern pieces back down, and this time I'm gonna use a rotary cutter because it takes so long to cut, but a rotary cutter goes so fast. So we are gonna put in a regular zipper, and I have this one here which kind of matches. I don't know, it's kind of like not perfect, but it'll do. If you didn't have to seam rip, are you even doing it right? So, I mean, that's just the nature of sewing. However, still love it. I am likely not gonna finish this all in a week as promised, and that's okay. I sew slow. That just is what it is. We're just gonna baste the lining to the waistband, and then we'll put on the waistband. I did interface the waistbands. That's at least one thing done. And because we made a fake waistband, because I couldn't find the pattern piece that goes around this, what we're gonna do is we're gonna have to be careful, but I think I have it long enough that it can lap over, so then I can put a hook and eye there, and then hopefully I can wear it. And now we hand stitch the zipper lining all the way from here and here, and then we can attach the waistband. Good news. So I got everything to work. We turned this side up on the waistband by 5/8 of an inch, so that way when you flip it down and I then slip stitch it into place, it's going to look nice. And then we'll fold this over like such and sew right through here. But right now we're just gonna sew around the whole thing. And then we have this extra overhang, like a really large amount. And then I'm gonna measure and see how much we need to close up the skirt and add a hook and eye. All right, so here's what we have. I pressed this seam so that it would all be flat, and we have this right here now. So as you can see, we have the folded edge right here, and we have this edge right here. What we're gonna do is fold this down. I am going to trim the seam a little, and we'll just pin this in place, and then we'll sew right through here, and so as close to the seam allowance as possible. Then we'll be able to flip this out and down. And Shein could never. Look at how nice this matches up. look at that. That houndstooth is perfectly matched through the seams. I didn't do a great job of matching the houndstooth from the waistband with the skirt itself. We'll flip this kind of like we did before, and then we're gonna slip stitch this down. So we'll do this, and I will need to trim this fusible interfacing. This is gonna flip inside, and then we're gonna take up this piece right here, and then it'll fold over like that. Now all we need to do is trim this corner, turn it right side out, and then slip stitch everything down. And then we'll tuck this under this piece right here. And then now we're just going to sew this all together. I do not want to do this on the machine. I don't think it'll look as nice. And I mean, I don't like hand stitching things. However, it is quite relaxing, and I mean, that's nice. And then I can just listen to a podcast or be with my own thoughts. I know, scary to be with one's own thoughts. But, you know, with the advent of technology, we really don't get enough time to just be by ourselves, to be bored. And I find that hand sewing things just gives me the opportunity to be bored. When we zip this up, it's gonna be like so. And there will be a hook and an eye here. And then you can just undo this or do this. So I've serged everything, all of this around, and now I'm just gonna turn it up. It is a little on the thick side, so I don't wanna turn it up and then turn it up again, which would be a nicer finish. And what I really should do is do a Hong Kong finish on this, so bias binding around the edge and then turn it up. However, I do not have the right bias color for this, so what we're gonna do is just leave it raw, and that is what it is. I did also turn up the lining twice, so you can't see that when it's flipped inside. For some reason, the lining is not matching up perfectly with the fabric, so I did have to do a little finagling and a little gathering. It doesn't look great, but you won't be able to see it because it's the lining on the inside. And the reason I point this out is because, you know, this is what happens in sewing, and sometimes you have to get clever and just kind of figure it out. Now, I could probably take this all out or cut a new one, but I'm not going to. Hi, so I'm starting to work on the red skirt, finally finished the other two skirts that I was working on, and I've sewn the darts, and now I'm just sewing in the pockets. And I was thinking, oh, I'll just serge the edge of the pocket and call it a day. But I think it would be so much prettier to do some kind of bias binding. So I just went through all my scraps, and as you can see, we have no red. So I was like, okay, well, I could make some bias binding, but then I found a project that I was working on originally, and I needed bias binding for it, and I have just enough left. And guys, look how cool this is. It's so pretty. It's going to be the prettiest bias tape for the inside of those pockets. So when these pockets get flipped to the inside, this fabric will it'll look really cute together. My hair's stuck. Now, unfortunately, when the other person that cut out this pattern, when they cut it out, they accidentally left off the flaps for the pocket. So what I'm going to have to do is sew 3/8 inch down on this pocket seam, and then also 5/8 of an inch on the side seams, and then it'll be an inset pocket, I think. We'll see how that goes. Otherwise, I'm seam ripping them out, and we're not going to have pockets in this. But I'd so much prefer to have pockets. As every girl knows, pockets are wonderful. All right, so this is the bias tool that we're going to use to basically feed the bias strip into, and then hopefully this will create bias binding that I can then use for the pockets. And I don't think I'm going to need all of this, obviously. So I think we're just going to do a couple of snips here and there. I think I'll measure around the pockets, and then I'll figure out exactly how much I need. I always find that it's really difficult to get this started, so I just kind of push it through with a pen. And now the ironing begins. All you have to do is pull this through like so. As you can see, it's starting to form bias tape. I'm starting to hand stitch the waistband to the underlining. Now, it did say to stitch in the ditch for this, but I much prefer a cleaner finish because frankly, I'm so bad at stitching in the ditch. Every time I do it, this waistband on the inside or on the outside looks janky, so I'm not doing that. And then I also slip stitched the facing to the underlining, being very careful not to catch the fashion fabric on the other side. I'm really glad I underlined this because it's so much easier to make this look nice. The other thing I wish I had done is interface the facing, but it didn't call for it in the pattern, so I wasn't really aware of that, unfortunately, and I just didn't think it through. I have a brilliant way of getting buttons to always stay on the garment, and that is with another button. So I saw this on a very expensive coat that I bought in London, and basically what you do is you have a backing button, and then you have your garment button, the one you want to show on the outside. So this is the fashion one. And you just kind of sandwich them in between the fabric and then sew through both. So that way it doesn't ever fall off. Also, since these are shank buttons, you want them to stand up. And so this will create that effect as well.
Now, mark the buttons, sew the buttonholes, and finally, we'll use a little bit of fray check to secure the buttonholes, and then we'll attach the snap. And finally, we have our 3 looks. This is outfit number 1. I'm really pleased with the pockets on this one. However, they do sit kind of low and they're not perfect, and it does kind of disrupt the side seam. However, it is still a cute outfit. I like the flare to it. I am really a big fan of the buttons. I did gain a little weight since I've made this. I went to North Carolina with my in-laws and ate a lot of Southern food, and so there's that. But otherwise, it would be a nicer fit on this. And then it has these darts in the back, and it was kind of hard to gather the waistband, but ultimately it turned out great. This is outfit number 2. However, I will say it's a little on the short side for my comfort anyway, and I think I might take this out and just bring it down just a tad. There's not a lot of seam allowance, or there's not a lot of hem allowance to do that, but maybe I'll put bias binding around the edge and then turn it down. That way it's just a little more comfortable for me. I feel like if I bent over, it would not be good. But this one brings me all sorts of joy. It has the sparkles, it has the houndstooth, and everything's aligned except for the waistband with the skirt like I mentioned before. This is outfit number 3. Very pleased with this skirt. It is just the right length. I feel like it's just maybe a half an inch to an inch longer than the other one. I love the bright colorful tweed. It brings me joy. I have been wearing this one a lot with boots and burgundy tights. It looks very cute together. I also have this burgundy shirt that I've been wearing with it and going between bare legs and tights, because I feel like it's too much burgundy if I have the burgundy tights with the burgundy shirt. For the purposes of this video, I've paired everything with this white turtleneck so that it doesn't distract from the skirts themselves. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you've made it this far, please consider liking and subscribing, as it really helps my channel. I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!